each one of these types has a first reaction to a super stressful situation. And it's so for the gut people, it's driven by anger. For the heart people, it's driven by feelings, and including sadness and grief. And then for the head people, it's anxiety. So when people are going through a transition, depending on what their Enneagram type is, they will probably start with one of those three.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode. We have Matt Shlegel on, and we will be talking about his book, Teamwork 9.0, and talking about Enneagrams and how we can use it to solve problems, including climate change. So
Yes.
that is a big one. That's a big one. So welcome, Matt.
So great to be with you here, Kendra. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad to have you on. And I was telling the assistant that reached out to tell me about your book regarding Enneagrams. I'm like, oh yes, I've been looking into that. And I had already had my children do to see which Enneagram. Okay, let's get that one. Enneagram.
Enneagram.
Enneagram. Enneagram. Okay, I'll just say it that way. Enneagram. Um, what Enneagram number my kids were,
Yeah.
just so that I could even know how to relate with them. I had made them do the test. I already had an
Yeah.
idea which one they were, and I was right on one child. I
Yeah.
wasn't right on the other, which was surprising. And
Yeah.
then just recently I did it myself. So, but it's funny, I
Oh,
had done it for my kids, but
are
I
you
had
going to
not done
tell us?
with my.
Are you going to tell us?
So I will tell you which one came up. Number
Yeah.
2. I'm a 2.
Okay. Yes.
I'm a 2. That one came
Yes.
up. What about you?
I,
What number are you?
I'm a 6.
You're a 6. So
I'm a
tell
6.
us. Okay, let's go. Okay, my gosh, we're jumping already ahead. So what is
Yes.
number 6? What is that one?
Oh, so sometimes we're called the loyalist. Sometimes we're called like the bureaucrat. Sometimes we're called the questioner. We ask lots of questions. We like systems. We like things to like go, in order predictably. So that's why we create these systems to try to make things happen in a predictable way.
And that's exactly what you did. So tell us
Yeah.
your background, because you wrote a book, but tell
Yeah.
us what your background is in and why it is that systems is definitely your
Exactly.
niche. Your niche.
Exactly. So yeah, I started out with a technical background in engineering. I became an engineering manager, and I became an engineer. And at some point, my manager came to me and said, "Hey, Matt, I want you to be a manager." And I said, "I don't know how to manage people. I only know about managing electrons." And he said, "Don't worry, you'll be fine. But now that you know I'm a 6, I'm not fine." And so I started studying everything, studying. And then I came across all of these tools to help teams and people be more effective in working together. And one of those systems I came across was the Enneagram. And so my engineering brain likes to pull these systems apart and put them back together and see what works well and what doesn't. And no matter how much I poked and prodded the Enneagram, it's like, oh, this is amazing. It's like it just keeps going and going and going, and it's so powerful, and it's so effective at predicting how things will work out, which appeals to a type 6, obviously. So so that's why I just became fascinated with it. I ended up using it at work with my team, both as a personality system, and then I asked the question, why are the Enneagram types numbers? Why aren't they letters or
Mhm.
colors or animals or, what? Why numbers?
And
Well, it
why?
turns well, it turns out that the numbers are are there for a reason, and it's the exact order in which humans solve problems. So there is a personality dynamic associated with each type, and that dynamic is exactly the dynamic you need in problem solving for that step. So, for instance, the type one is sometimes called the perfectionist, and they're
Mhm.
the ones that say, "Hey, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like this." Well, what's the first step in problem solving? Hey, there's a problem. It shouldn't be like that. It should be like this, right? And on and around. So step two, for instance, if you
With mine.
maybe relating to the
Mhm.
step two is who cares? Who cares about the problem? If somebody thinks there's a problem and nobody around them cares, then you're probably not going to end up solving the problem. But if the one brings up, "Hey, there's a problem," and then a bunch of people around them say, "Yeah, you're right. We care. There is a problem." Then guess what? The problem gets solved. You move to
Mm.
step 3. Let's come up with some ideas. And step 4, oh, let's pick a good idea. And step 5, let's analyze the ideas. Step 6, oh, let's build a plan to get to the goal. 7,
Oh.
let's get everybody excited. Step 8, let's stop talking and do it. And step 9, how did it work?
That's so
Uh,
perfect.
Yeah,
So then if 9 people were to be in a team and
yeah,
each one was one number,
yeah.
then would that make that team be more effective if
Mm,
there was a 1, a 2, a 9, all the way through 9?
Right. Yeah, exactly. If it would be a perfectly balanced team. Now, the
Mm.
the odds that you would get 9 people, all one of each type together is almost astronomical that that would happen.
Mhm.
So most teams aren't balanced like that, which is why I have a consulting practice.
Yes, and I liked, I just went to your link right now, which by the way, I'll make sure to link in the show notes so that people can
Mhm.
go because you have a free assessment one, and yours was actually easier. I didn't end up filling it. I didn't have time this right before our call to fill it out because and I had already done it in another website, but I felt the way you just checked marked on these was easier than these other ones that go into these questions that it's like from inaccurate to accurate, kind of like where are you? It's a little more like gray area when you're answering and you're like, am I like which? So those are a little more ambiguous sometimes
Right.
in these other websites to answer. And I thought yours was really clear and concise because
Oh,
you just
thank you.
check mark which ones
Yeah,
apply to you and then you kind of know in the number that you check mark the most.
right.
That's
Exactly,
probably
exactly,
that's
exactly.
your
And just one, warning about Enneagram assessments. Um, I in my experience, the one that I have up right now on my website is a good one. But
Mhm.
you have to also acknowledge that you're coming to the test at a certain state in your life. And like for instance, when I first took the assessment years ago, I tested highest as an 8, and 6
Ooh.
was the next highest. They were about the same, but 8 was a little higher. And that's because I was working in a situation surrounded by eights where 8 behavior was expected, and I was behaving like an 8. And
Mm.
I was just feeling the role that was expected of me. So when I checked off those things, I was like, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. And I wasn't thinking about, is that really the way I would respond if I were just doing it on my own, or am I doing it because that's what's expected me of my culture? And so
Yeah.
just be aware that sometimes you may not score the highest on your actual core type.
Okay. Now, with that said, do you notice that the same can occur then in a family, like in which maybe you end up being more of a number because that's what maybe is needed more in that role as a parent or something that you end up kind of becoming more of a certain number in that dynamic as well?
I think that's more true for adults than for
Mhm.
children.
Children. Okay.
If it's children taking the test, that they're less in control, and they've been less culturized into
Mm-hmm.
behaving in certain ways in certain situations, and so they tend to answer the questions more honestly. And so so I'd say that's more of a situation for an adult, like
Mm-hmm.
say a mother who like being a mother, there's a lot of two-ness in being a mother. And so,
Mm. Mhm.
if you're a mother and you're taking care of kids, you're like, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do
I
that.
do.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
that.
I'm a two. I'm a two, two, two. Yeah, true, true,
Right.
true.
And you're behaving like a two, whether you're a two or not, as a mother, right?
Right. That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about your life. So where do you live? And we want to kind of again we already found out how it is you came about developing the system, but I wanted to learn more about you. So where do
Oh,
you
okay. Thanks.
live and a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm married for 31 years. I have three kids. The oldest is 28, living up in Seattle. Next is down in San Diego, and both are young women who are successfully out on their own, and I'm very proud of them. And then I have a son who is still with us here in the home. He's in college. He's taking classes, and he's studying, likely to be an engineer. So,
Like
you know,
dad.
following in his dad's footsteps a little bit, and
Hmm.
I'm very proud of him and the progress he's making too. So, yeah, it's great.
That's fun. Now, how did this Enneagram, did you end up making everybody test when you found this out? Like, how long ago did you find out about Enneagrams? And did you end up then having everyone in your family then take the
Yeah, so
test?
I've been working with the Enneagram for over 20 years now.
Oh,
And we
wow.
actually learned it through my wife's church. So the pastor at my wife's church, is really into the Enneagram, and in fact, he now has a foundation that focuses on different elements of spirituality that aren't necessarily religious,
Hmm.
and one of those is um, the Enneagram. And so he actually has invited me to become the director of Enneagram studies for his foundation. So
Oh,
he's like my
wonderful.
longtime mentor on the Enneagram, and I'm still we do monthly Enneagram workshops together. So that's a long way of saying I actually came into it after most of my family already knew it.
Wow.
And they're and when I'm taking the test, and I'm testing 8, and they're like looking at me, you're not an 8,
No.
you're a 6. I'm like, oh, okay.
And you're like, okay, so if you go with the flow, then wait, are eights more rigid?
Oh,
Are
8s,
eights more rigid?
no, no, I mean,
No, okay.
8s are probably less rigid.
Less rigid. Okay.
They're the ones who like to be in control. So they're the
Okay.
boss or the asserter, that's that style, right? So
Okay,
that
but now
so
when you said no, okay, I'm gonna say, oh, okay. That's why I said, oh, okay. Maybe you weren't an eight. If you're like, okay, yeah, I'll go with the six because
yeah, right.
maybe if you were an eight, you would have been like, no, no, I'm an eight. I know
That's
I
right,
am.
exactly, exactly, yeah. It's like, when they said, "You're not an 8," it makes me think, which is exactly what a 6 does, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, wait, no, yeah, you're right. I'm not. So, okay, so then you did that then in your personal life, and then
Yeah,
how is it that then you started then to implement? So when you were given this role at work,
yeah,
to be a project manager, you're like, how am I going to manage people?
yeah,
You come up with this system, this tool.
yeah.
How did you start implementing it then with your team?
Right. Well, first of all, like most people, you come in to the Enneagram through that personality aspect of it. So that problem solving, process, the 1 through 9 came later. So I just started using it with my team, and introduced them to it, got them to understand each other's styles and types. And it was really very effective at helping everybody understand each other's perspective, And, most importantly, it gives you a vocabulary. It gives you a vocabulary to talk about these different dynamics that are going on, right? When some conflict arises and you have the vocabulary of the Enneagram, and you could say, well, you're a one and you're a seven, right? And the ones have this objective, the sevens have this objective, and you're all trying to get to the same end point, but you have these different perspectives, and that's where this conflict is arising. And so let's talk about that. And it's really that's one of the things I'm most grateful about for the system is that vocabulary, and then allowing people to just open up that possibility that, oh, well, yeah, my perspective isn't the only perspective. And now that I understand they're a one and I understand what's important to them, I can totally see why they're doing that. And well, this is the common ground, so let's do that. Boom, done.
Then it helps. Now, how open are people in general to take the test when you realize, like when you're managing a
Yeah.
team, are people really excited to find out what they are? Are people reluctant, or do people see how beneficial this could be in that team or work environment? Does, and you know what I mean? Like, have you had all kinds of people like be
Of
like,
course.
I don't want to do
And,
that. I don't want to
all
know.
of the above, and it depends on the type. Like
Okay.
some types, like you said earlier, eights. I am an eight. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Right. I mean, eights like one, they don't mind being an eight, and they like resonate with that eightness, and and it's done. Um, and certain type ones are also they're pretty easily self-identify. Um, but then some of the other types have, more trouble. Like take the nine, right? The nine is the master at understanding everybody's perspective. That's what they do. They're always like thinking of others. They're always putting themselves into other people's shoes. And so, it's really hard for them to like say, well, then who am I? And
Mm.
so and so when you're talking to a 9, it's like, well, maybe that is, one of the, aspects of being a 9 is that you can do this. Oh, okay. Right? So each type, another one is, 4s. They're able to put themselves in everybody's emotional shoes, and so sometimes they have a little more trouble. 5s, they tend to be able to, masterfully take on different roles and personas in the environment. So they feel like they can be anybody. So they're like, and to the point where like, okay, so which one am I?
Which one am I?
Right.
Because they're a
And
chameleon.
and
Uh-huh.
and the one that they are is the one that's able to put themselves in everybody's persona.
Right, 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 right. So yeah, so then it helps. Now, in the work environment, when you've done this, which numbers do you see that there's numbers that work better together in general personality wise? Which what would you say is that? Is there a
Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
formula for that?
Right. And I actually write about this in a chapter in my book called Work Team Triads. And I first noticed it just anecdotally, just, seeing, if you just throw people together, right? And they kind of organically start to work together. And then I would see which types are just like naturally working together. And I found out that there are these three distinct groups that just like naturally work together with almost no conflict at all. It's just like, wow. And there is and I call them work team triads, and I gave them names. But there is another author who called them the harmony triads. And
Mm,
so they're the 1, the 4, and the 7, the
okay.
2, the 5, and the 8, and the 3, 6, and 9. And so
Okay.
those groups of 3 tend to like each other and work well together. And so that's a really interesting facet that I've found of this. And each one of those teams brings a certain distinct dynamic, right? So like if you have a like the 1 and the 7 and the 4 together, they want to do new, innovative, fun stuff, right? So that's like your, you know, team for like exploring new possibilities. And then the 2, 5, and the 8, what they want to do is like we want to get stuff done. And then, so then that's, those are the type of people who tend to like migrate to more operations types of
Mhm.
roles in companies where they're just like cranking out product, or they're running the place, right? And then the 369, that's the group that kind of wants to like look at everything and build a like a smooth operating structure for everything, right? And so they tend
It
to, put in place like the organizations and the systems that just kind of make it all work together. And so those are kind of the three, and you'll see like companies go through that same phase too, right?
Well, that's what I was
Uh,
just gonna say. Yeah,
yeah,
because you need the creatives to come
yeah,
up with the idea of
yeah,
what is going to be to then hand off to the 2, the 5s, and the 8s
yep,
to then implement it, to
yep.
then hand to the team that's the 3, 6, 9 to then be able to
System.
create the whole picture. It's like,
Exactly. So I call them the startup
wow.
triad, the industrious triad, and the systematizing triad.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Now, in those, okay, so those are tryouts. Now,
yeah,
what are there numbers, let's say, that would work? I know you mainly do it for work environments, but
yeah.
would there be then numbers that work together as teams in relationship wise too?
Right.
Because these are triads. Like, which ones would be like numbers that work well just as
Right.
binary? Like,
Right, right. So any combination of those harmony triads. So like oftentimes you'll see, eights and twos, pair up. You'll see eights, twos, and fives. Any combination of those will pair up. One, fours, and sevens. Boy, you see that all the time. Ones and sevens marry each other all the time.
okay,
The other one is 369s. I see couples from that triad together all the time. And then there's one other pattern that I've seen, and this is a really interesting aspect of the Enneagram, is that for any type, the hardest dynamic, so like I'm a 6, and I'm kind of in my 6 dynamic, and I have more or less access to the other dynamics, the other 8 dynamics. But generally the hardest dynamic for any type to access is one type higher. Like for me
oh,
it's the 7, right? And
okay,
and 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 that is true almost all the time, all the way around. So here's what I see happen is that when women, because women make the choice usually in the relationship, right? So when women are looking for somebody to partner with, they see in their that person who is one number higher, someone who's very complimentary to them.
hmm,
So I see this all the time, and it does get a little bit gender related in this
specific.
case, but
Hmm.
that's just the pattern I've observed, is that the woman will often choose a man who is one number higher, and so that's another pattern I see.
That is interesting.
Yeah,
Now, I'm curious now because you've interviewed then a lot of people to be able to see all these patterns. You've been
yeah,
able to observe a lot of different people.
yeah,
Because with this podcast being a lot regarding grief, have you
yeah,
noticed in situations that are hard
yeah,
how each number deals with transitions
yeah,
differently, like a change in life? What
yeah,
could you talk a little bit about that and how
yeah,
does that apply? How would that apply in situations like that in their life?
yeah. Yes, great question. And so and Enneagram, really can speak to this very well, because there's another set of triads in the Enneagram, and these are called the centers. These are the main triads of the Enneagram. It's the 891, the 234, and the 567. And the best way I found to explain this is if you've seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, and there's
Mhm.
Dorothy, and she meets these three characters on her journey. She meets the lion who wants courage, meets the tin man who wants a heart, and
Mhm.
meets the scarecrow who wants a head. And those are exactly the same, you know, elements that are associated with these main triads. The 891 are the gut people,
Mhm.
the 234 are the heart people, and the 567 are the head people. And then each one of these types has a first reaction to a super stressful situation. And it's so for the gut people, it's driven by anger.
Mm.
For the heart people, it's driven by feelings and including sadness and grief. And then for the head people, it's anxiety. So when people are going through a transition, depending on what their Enneagram type is, they will probably start with one of those three. Some people will go straight to grief, some people will go to anger, and some people will go to anxiety and have panic attacks, right? So, and so for instance, when I saw the title of your podcast, I knew immediately that you were in the 234 group because you start off with grief and gratitude, and which is exactly, the grief is the 234 and the gratitude is the two. So if you had asked me just from the podcast title, I could have guessed two.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting
Amazing how
how.
much you can know
Yes.
about someone just by these choices. And then with knowing this then
Yeah.
too, then in assimilating when other people are going through something hard, by knowing your Enneagram, then you can know, and by knowing other people in
Yeah.
your family's Enneagram, you can know where they're at in that moment of their transition and why it is that maybe they're leading more towards the anxiety component in that transition rather than with the grief and the sadness, or
Right.
like the other person may be leading with anger, and it
Right.
helps you understand and be more empathetic towards the way that each of us is different, dealing with it differently.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
And no response is wrong, right?
Right.
There
Right.
is no wrong response.
No.
And and you know we're humans, and this is the one thing I love about the Enneagram is because it just, like once I understood I'm a 6, and being a 6 guy in America is kind of a tough thing. It's not the normal accepted behavior for a guy. The kind of the prototypical guy model is the 8. And so
Mm.
as a 6, I'm having to kind of step out of my comfort zone and be more like what's expected of me in my culture. And then, if you're not aware that you're doing that intentionally, and you're just like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just do what comes to them naturally? you know you kind of, it can be a little self-defeating, right? But once you like understand your Enneagram type, and then you understand you know what is your gift, what is your superpower in problem solving, because we all have a superpower in problem solving. We all
Mm.
have this superpower that we can contribute to helping everybody else out. And then once you know that, it's like, oh, I feel the way I am because that's exactly the right thing for me to feel. And I just need to now know how to channel that into a healthy contribution to the group and not let it control me. I'm just using it to inform me
That's
that,
the right word.
I can now, inform the group better about what is going on. Does that make
That
sense?
yes, absolutely. And I think that that is so important because sometimes we're so hard on ourselves and how it is we react to situations. We're our biggest judge,
Yeah,
right? And so
exactly.
by being understanding and having grace with ourselves in the way that we deal with certain situations and the way that we react based on our personality, it gives us also that capacity of having grace with others if we have grace with ourselves as well. So,
Yes, right. And then once you have that acceptance of yourself and
yes.
oh, it's okay for me to feel anxious. I'm supposed to feel anxious. It's not a
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh, it's okay for them to be angry. That's exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
What the
It's okay for them to be sad. That's exactly what they're supposed to be doing. It's all okay. And then we can just like, what is that telling us? Why are
Mhm.
they sad? What about what we're doing is, causing
Bringing up
them to
those
be sad,
emotions.
and what can we
Mhm.
do to help them, overcome that?
Mhm. Yes, no, that is awesome. Now, you mentioned how, and this before we started recording, how then these enneagrams can also help us with climate change. Like,
Yes.
okay, let's go into that. Like, how is it that understanding this can then lead us to solve these bigger world problems?
Right, right. Yeah, so you can look at the challenge of climate change as a problem, right? It's a
Uh-huh.
problem, right? And so step one in that problem solving process is I identifying that, oh, there's a problem. And so then you once you say, okay, there's a problem, then you go to step two, which is, do you care? And I would say right now, collectively, and I live in America, so I'll just speak for America. In
Mhm.
my impression is not enough people yet care,
Care. Mhm.
right? Once
Mhm.
enough people care, then action starts to happen, right? And so I think we're in this process now of moving from realization of the problem and then moving into caring about the problem. But there's a big challenge with caring about climate change, which is different from other challenges in a big way. And that is that once you acknowledge that, oh, there's a climate crisis and it's caused by burning fossil fuels, that's the root cause of this, is
Mhm.
burning fossil fuels. Then you're like, if if I acknowledge that problem, does that mean I have to stop burning fossil fuels?
Mm.
Does that mean I have to start thinking about how I'm using fossil fuels? you
Mhm.
know, when I'm showering, is that a gas heater out there heating up that water? When I get in my car, am I burning fossil fuels to get to work? I get on an airplane, am I burning, fossil fuel kerosene
Right.
as I'm flying across the country?
As I'm using this plastic cup, am I did fossil fuel go into creating this? Is it, like
Right.
so many things.
Exactly. And so once you get to that point, you know, what is the first, in that process, right? I look at it as a grieving process. What's the first step in grieving? Denial.
Realization. Well, oh, denial. Yeah, if we go by the steps, yeah, or that
Yeah,
realization. Yeah, okay. So you
right.
deny. Yeah.
So it's a lot easier
Mm.
for us to just deny the problem and deny there's a problem and blithely go along on our lives and just ignore the problem,
Because
then
if we accept it, then we have to take action, which is
right.
way more work.
But it's more than that. It's actually going through the grieving process because,
Hmm.
and you see it, right? Some people will get sad, we have, climate grief now, that's a term.
Mm.
We have climate anxiety or eco anxiety, that's a term. So you can see, and then you get
The
people
anger. And
who
then the
go to
angry
anger,
people.
just like we had, I think, the mass shooting we had in Buffalo is a
Mm,
manifestation of, somebody who's reacting to climate with anger. And
mm,
so we're going to see these reactions to the climate crisis. Anger, we're going to see grief, and we're going to see anxiety. And we're going to be just seeing more and more of it because, you know, the climate crisis isn't going away. And,
mm,
we're all going to be impacted by it soon. And so, I know this is kind of heavy stuff, but, the the Enneagram does give us a model for how humanity will respond in our various ways. And then and the hopeful thing is, as more and more of us actually overcome our denial, you know, then and our impact and start to work through that grieving process, that's going to get us to action. That is the thing that will get us to action.
mm. And now in that action, then I was having this conversation right before in the other interview I was having, and it's about like sometimes we think these big things right are happening, war. Okay, what do I do about that? Like, right, can I go and stop the actual? No. So, right, there's other
Right,
smaller things we can do in our day to day to
right,
have a ripple effect in the big scheme.
right.
So, in that action, then that we can each take, then for climate change and the impact each of us are making, what
Yeah,
would you say in these, going back to Enneagrams,
yeah.
what are there then some specific things then that in each Enneagram group would then lead more towards doing?
Right. Yeah, and that's a great question. And what I tell people is, once they do get to the point where they want to take action,
Hmm.
you know, the climate crisis is, there's a term now called hyper object. The hyper object is the thing that touches everything, right? And there's a parable about the elephant and the five blind men, and you put five blind
Oh
men
yeah,
into a room
they're
with an
each
elephant.
touching
Yeah,
part
exactly,
of
right?
the elephant,
And,
the
and they're
tail, the
all
trunk.
describing the problem in different ways, but the
Hmm.
real problem is it's the elephant in the room.
Right.
Right? And so, when I talk to people, who want to take action, I ask them, "Well, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about, recycling, or are you passionate about reducing single-use plastic, or are you, passionate about working with your local representative and getting them to do something, or because we all need to do everything. And so the best thing to do is the thing that you're passionate about, because you're bringing your whole heart and your whole self to it, and that will infect other people to want to join you, because they'll
Hmm.
see your passion and they'll want to join you in doing it. And so, there's no wrong answer in taking climate action. It's an all of the above thing, and just follow your heart, and do it. Do what you can do, while keeping in mind that the most important thing you can do is actually start to reduce the amount of fossil fuel you burn in your life, and then be that example. So if you can bike instead of getting into the car, bike instead of getting into the car, and show everybody, hey, I'm going to bike to the station instead of taking the car. Whatever, just start thinking about how you're using, like we're electrifying our home. And the last appliance that we had was the water heater, and we
Hmm.
replaced our gas water heater with a heat pump water heater. And we turned off the gas to the house. Now there's no gas flowing to the house. And it's great. So you just and now the city is going to interview me and ask me about the experience, and then they're going to put up my testimonial. And so I'm just going to, like,
There's a
share
ripple
my
effect
experience
right
and get
there.
other people to do
Right.
it. And that's what we all
Yes,
need to
that
do. Yeah.
yes, just one little thing can make a difference. Now, in the same aspect then, in back again to even just the teamwork 9.0, this is like that's teamwork right there in the big scope of things of life right
Exactly.
there. And then in your work environment, then the same. When we know that what we're doing has an impact in the organization we're part of, in the family unit we're in the
Yep.
city we live in, and so forth,
Yeah.
it does make a difference. Like
Yeah.
when we realize our actions do affect another human being. So it
Right.
all comes down also to that
Right.
connectiveness of the human of humanness
Right,
of each
exactly.
other.
It's very scalable, it's from the smallest team, like, you and your
The family
partner or
unit.
you and your
Hmm.
family, or I joined a rock band last year,
Oh,
and so
how
yeah,
cool.
so,
What do you play? Do you play
me
or do
and
you
other
sing?
musicians, so I'm kind of the
What
utility player. I can
Okay.
I've been, doing vocals, bass, and drums with this
That's
band. So, yeah, but all of them have different, Enneagram styles, so
that's
you see
wonderful.
all those dynamics come into play in that situation too. But it's everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And then, oh, she's a one, that's why she's bringing this up, and okay, I understand that, and let's, work with her to, help her solve this thing that she thinks is wrong, and let's help her get it to, being right.
Did you make them all in the band also take the
I
test?
haven't said anything about the Enneagram to them. This is
Okay.
this is all just my going on in my mind.
Now, yeah, now they're gonna have to take it so that you guys even can just work more effectively. Yeah, that'd be interesting that in every single dynamic that we're in, that if we were to take that, but if not, then like you said, if we even have an understanding of what other people are in terms of personality, it's just how
Right,
we relate to them that
right,
also shifts, and just by even changing that dynamic and that interaction, it already has an effect
right.
on the on the
And
on
this
the
just
team.
came up the other day, a, one of the persons who's a type 1 had made a comment, and I thought, how would I respond to that? And I'm like, so they're in, the intuitive group and I'm in the head group. And the comment they made really made no sense to me, to my rational
Mhm.
brain. But whatever I would say would come from a place of like, that doesn't make sense. Can you explain that to me? Whereas there's another person in the band who is also in that intuitive group, who's a 9, and I know the 9 will always say the nicest, softest thing and will understand the 1 way better than I do. So I just zipped my mouth and I just waited, and sure enough, the 9 spoke up and said the most perfect thing. So, you know, just just having that knowledge and just being able to check myself and my reaction and just letting that naturally happen. It was, uh, you know,
Oh, how
that was
beautiful.
worth the price of admission on learning the Enneagram just for that.
That's beautiful. And but that takes a lot of self-control to do what you did of just like, okay, let me just wait because I know that I will not say the right thing to this number one.
Yeah.
But if I just wait, a number nine will say the right thing in
Yep.
order to
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
to put ease on the situation. That's wonderful. Okay, so then how many years has it been that you've been using this then in the workspace? I know you said 20 years ago was
Yeah.
when your wife first
Yeah.
brought it up. I honestly, it's only been in the last year that I've heard about this. So
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah,
about
yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah.
myself, like I
Yeah.
had not heard about this. But
Yeah.
again, I am not testing myself all the time to figure out what personality trait
Oh,
I
and,
am.
the
But it
the millennials are all over this.
yes,
And
oh that I'm hearing it so much now. Yeah.
yeah, and if you go onto YouTube and you Google Enneagram, there is just some
Yeah.
hilarious videos
Yeah.
about different Enneagram types. I
What they
mean,
would do in the same situation. Yeah,
so
like how they would
creative,
handle
yeah,
it's
and
funny.
just
It's
so
funny.
funny, and it's a great way to learn about the different
Yeah.
styles.
Yeah. So for you then, when did you start implementing it then in
It was
your
probably,
job?
it was shortly after I learned it. I just started, talking to people about it. It was a part of my learning process. Do you know this? Are you interested? And the people in my group would say, yeah, I'll take the test, sure.
Okay.
And they took it. And so it was pretty much right away that I was
That
able
they
to start to use it in the work setting,
in the
very
work environment.
informally at first. Yeah.
Okay. And now let's talk about your book. When did you launch it? And how can people get a hold of it?
Oh yeah. So thank you for that. I launched it March 2020, right as we were going
Okay.
into pandemic world. And so yeah, and it's available on Amazon, and definitely check it out. And you can go to the website and take that assessment, and that's complimentary. And just love to get your feedback on your thoughts on the book, and how you're using it. It's always a delight to hear the different stories and different experiences people are having.
Now, who is this book for? Who is it for? Is it for someone that that is like yourself, that was a project manager that needed to figure out, is it for a parent? Is it for a teacher? Is it for somebody in the workspace? Who is the best person
Right.
for this book? Who is this book
So
for?
the answer is leaders of teams. So I
Mm,
was thinking of project and program managers. I had them in mind, and then I just had managers in general who are managing a team, and leaders in general who are leading a team. I wrote the book for them. It is just such a powerful tool for a leader to have that knowledge, even if their team doesn't. I'm sharing examples of how I use it with my band. Right? They don't know the Enneagram, but I know the Enneagram. And as a leader, I want everybody to work well together, and I know when I can jump in and when I shouldn't, and when other people can jump in, and it's the perfect thing, right? And so understanding, I mean, and I have a chapter called shared leadership. It's like, when is it better for you to step back and let somebody else take that lead rather than just jumping in yourself? And so, but it's for leaders in general that I really have, targeted the book.
wonderful, wonderful. Now, is there anything I have not asked you that you would like to share, or any final words for the listeners as they're listening? Again, we've gotten a lot. We've gotten of how it is you can use it just for yourself, knowing your Enneagram. How is that helpful for yourself? How is it helpful when you're interacting with others in a work environment? How is it helpful in understanding that as you're dealing with a transition or grief experience in your life or a difficult time? And then how is it helpful when you're leading also then teams? So what other things would you like to share with the listeners regarding how they can use this knowledge, this
Yeah,
tool?
and I so appreciate this conversation, and you asked all the right question. It's so great to be able to share this. So I really, you did such a good job of leading us through that. I don't have anything else to add.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I'm glad I was able to ask the right questions to get to that. So
Absolutely.
thank you. I
Thank you
learned
so much.
so much about it. I
Yeah.
learned so much about it. And again, the book is Teamwork 9.0, and author Matt Schlegel, who is with us today again. And thank you so much again for sharing your knowledge and on this topic, and your own life experiences of how you've used this in your life. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. It was a delight being with you today.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.